Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to present the latest in our ongoing webinar series. Today's title is Supercharge PPM Results with a Business-Driven Approach. My name is Jim Patterson, and I'll be presenting this content for you today. A couple things just from a housekeeping perspective before we get started. We are in webinar mode so that all attendees will be muted during the presentation. However, in the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen, there is a Q&A panel where you can actually type in and ask questions. Our moderator will answer questions as she can through the course of the webinar, and if there's other ones that we need to get back with you afterwards, we'll be happy to respond at that point. Also be advised that all of the slides you're going to see today and a recording of this session will be mailed out to all the attendees, so you don't necessarily have to take copious notes or try to get the content from the slides in a hurried fashion. So you will be getting this content as you go on through. All right. So our agenda today to cover this topic, we're going to give you a little bit of background about EPM Live as a company. Then we're going to talk about the concept of business-driven project portfolio management. And then we're going to really get into EPM Live's capabilities in this area that help help drive PPM capabilities. My apologies, I was told the screen is not sharing. Okay. We're going to then talk about the EPM Live PPM capabilities that support that business-driven PPM capabilities. And then we're going to demonstrate and spend most of the time showing you stuff in our solution that actually supports this, and then we'll wrap things up with a summary. All right, let's talk a little bit about EPM Live's background. EPM Live is really a leading PPM work management platform that really revolutionizes the way people manage projects and work throughout their organization. Not only do we handle the portfolio management pieces we're going to talk about today, but also carry it forward to the next step through detailed execution of projects and work in this organization. So our solutions are pre-built for our customers to make it easy and quick to get the solutions up, yet they're highly configurable to meet the specific needs of any given customer or any given organization. We offer our solutions both as an online solution in a software as a service SaaS model, or as an on-premise solution that you can install right on your own servers. Our solution is developed in SharePoint. It is SharePoint based, meaning that if you already use SharePoint within your organization, we can install everything you're going to see today as an incremental add to what you're already doing with SharePoint in your organization. We have over 5,000 successful customers who are using some form of our technology worldwide, and we're really happy with the type of market acceptance we've got in that area. Also, the analyst community is receiving us very well. The folks whose job it is to review and recommend these solutions to the marketplace consistently give us high marks. And we're proud of the fact that the folks that are in the know see the value and see the quality of what we're doing here with EPM Live. Also, EPM Live is now part of the Upland family of solutions. Upland is a company which we joined forces with at the beginning of this year. It really provides us the ability to go-to-market as the largest provider of cloud-based enterprise software for project portfolio and work management. And the substantial backing and the substance of the new company really is going to benefit our customers by providing the ability to innovate and support our customers in a very solid way. So let's talk about business-driven PPM. You know, business-driven PPM is essentially a top-down approach to looking at your projects and your portfolios. Oftentimes when people put a PPM solution into place, it's about the more traditional things that you see over here in this column, which really is about bottoms-up execution where people manage and track all of their projects, and the portfolio management may only be something along the lines of portfolio visibility to see how the projects are going. But what happens before that? You know, how do you choose which projects are going to be worked on within an organization? What are the trade-offs that need to be made? What projects need to be killed or cut or postponed? You know, what are the bases for selecting the projects as well? So in the business-driven top-down model versus the traditional bottoms-up execution model, there are some distinct differences. Now, the business-driven model is more strategic in its outlook. and the way that you actually look at the business and look at the projects and the work efforts that you're going to tackle, where the more traditional approach is more tactical and executing things in the detailed fashion and getting things out to the door on time and on budget. Business-driven is more results-oriented, right? What are we going to get out of this? What are the benefits? You know, what are the reasons why we're tackling this? What is the value to the organization? Where the more traditional is cost-oriented. Let's try to get this thing in on time and under budget. Also, business-driven is more portfolio-centric, meaning we're looking at this from a higher level of a portfolio or group of portfolios to where we want to make sure that the portfolios that we are tackling are addressing specific business needs and aligns with the goals of our organization, where the more traditional is more task-centric and getting the work done type of focus. Also, business-driven is a time-to-value proposition, where you're basically constantly refining and reassessing the portfolio to make sure that we're always working on the right things. And as things come down the pike, we can add more and more value and more selection of objective criteria to help us with our decision making. In the more bottoms-up traditional approach, it's big bang. We get all our projects in all at one time, and we execute on that, and we do the best we can. Oftentimes, the project selection piece that happens in the business-driven isn't being really done in the traditional sense, and we just do everything that comes down our pike, and on our project execution, we're at the mercy of whether or not we have the bandwidth to deliver on all the things that basically were put on our plate. Where the project selection piece in the business-driven approach is much more selective and much more objective in the way we select and prioritize our projects. Also, business-driven is more about adoption, where traditional is more about compliance. Also, in a business-driven model, the business user really gets involved. The business user is in there in the requesting of the projects. The business is actually making assessments on the value of projects and in the selection process, where the traditional is really about the PMP or project manager types act really managing and executing the projects and kind of marshaling the resources in a very detailed fashion. So the idea is it's not an either-or approach. What we're going to talk about today is more of that top-down business-driven approach, but an organization can really benefit from doing a bit of both. If you take a business-driven approach to selection and alignment of your portfolio and then put the disciplines in place for the more bottoms-up traditional, you end up selecting the right work that has the most value to your organization. And then if you select the right work and the right amount of work that you can handle as an organization, then you'll be able to execute well in a more traditional fashion. So they do complement one another very nicely. So one of the first things in a business-driven approach to PPM is that you want to align your portfolio with the company objectives and the performance goals. We want to ask the question very simply, is the requested project or the project being contemplated, how well does it align or fit with the overall company objectives? The idea being, if we actually do work that actually supports those higher level strategies and objectives, and we succeed at those projects, then hence we should succeed at those higher level objectives. If we're working on a lot of efforts that really don't support or help us achieve those objectives, then we're being sidetracked, we're being diverted, where our efforts are being diluted towards meeting those overall company goals and objectives. Also, we want to be able to quantify the contribution by business line and function. So the idea here is that if you have different portfolios and different strategies, we want to be able to have objective measures, ways to score and value projects on a consistent basis. So the rationale for selecting projects isn't about strong personalities or who screams the loudest or who's more persistent. The idea is we want to be working on the right things based on the right criteria and the right parameters and the right trade-offs. And then we can prioritize these projects based upon their revenue or benefit potential. You know, what is the return to the organization for investing in these projects? Because essentially when you're doing selection, you're really choosing investment bets. You're choosing what investments you're going to make as a company in these projects to provide the best return and value to the organization. That value often is in the form of revenue opportunities to bring new revenue into the company, show that we have a successful project or bring a new product or whatever it might be out to the market, or some other benefit. Might be cost savings or efficiencies or things like that that have a tangible revenue bottom line impact. And the idea there is that we want to evaluate which projects potentially are going to bring us the most value or the most benefit. And then in a strategic management approach, you're really focused on the expected business outcomes and the realized value not on the execution of what it's going to take to do it, but really focusing on what are we going to get for this investment? What is the outcome we're looking for? What are the direct and indirect benefits that are going to come our way should we deliver on this project successfully? And then realize the value that we estimate as we go on through, and making sure that we do realize the value on that. As the graphic shows here, taking a more strategic approach to this, we're making sure that all parties are marching towards the same targets and the same bullseye. Another aspect on business-driven PPM is budget and financial management. So in this aspect of it, outside of strategy, we want to make the right portfolio decisions within given constraints. Budgets are not unlimited. We are given certain amounts that we can deal with, certain amounts we can invest in project-related efforts. And the key is within those constraints, finding how we can derive the most value of the potential or candidate projects from those potential projects, and making sure that we're spending our dollars wisely, meaning that a good selection and a good process that in a business-driven fashion will allow us to select the projects that provide the greatest value for any level of spend. If I've got $10 million to spend, what's the greatest amount of value I can get for that $10 million of spend? It could be great if we could do our highest return projects, or it could be lower if we have other projects that are more overhead, compliance, or regulatory in nature that aren't really providing us returns. But the idea there is we want to try to maximize, given those constraints, the best value for that portfolio. Also, we want to assess the portfolio across multiple dimensions and variables. So while there is strategy alignment and there is financial constraints, there are things like just overall returns. There's things like risk assessments. There's things about whether or not these things have good market value potentially. There's other dimensions depending on the nature of the business you're in that you want to consider, and they should all go part and parcel towards an objective analysis of your potential portfolio and which things you should be selecting. Ultimately, based on those data points, you want to make objective data-driven decisions, not emotional or personality-driven decisions on which projects that we should be doing. Also, we establish a governance process to accommodate change, meaning it's not a static environment. Periodically, you need to evaluate your portfolio in a business-driven PPM scenario, meaning that the decision you made last quarter on which mix of projects you're going to work on, as you have some execution and you see how projects are going and whether they're on track or returning the benefit or performing the way you thought they would, we might want to assess in the context of maybe new project ideas that are coming down the pike. Do we need to replace a non-performing project that's already in our active portfolio with a more promising one that's coming down? The idea is that using this objective data-driven decision-making process, we can start evaluating those trade-offs on a regular basis, which often happens in an organization on a quarterly, semi-annual basis. And then really the key is to provide visibility so that we can allow for mid-course corrections dictated by the business environment. If situations change, our governance process and our tools and our systems should give us the visibility so we can make good decisions for those mid-course corrections, abandon things that are not working, and take on things that show promise. So let's talk about EPM Live from a solution overview perspective and how it supports these types of concepts. First off, EPM Live serves the needs of a variety of different companies and maturity levels. One of the things about good business-driven PPM, it is a mature concept for folks from a process perspective and a discipline perspective. That being said, there's not a one-size-fits-all proposition. Tackling some, let's just say, low-hanging fruit in good portfolio management practices in this area is a good way to start, though you may not take it to the nth degree at first. And you may add different capabilities, different objective measures, and different process features as you go on through. The idea is we can meet the needs of the lighter weight, smaller company, as well as the heavyweight enterprise. And what's nice about EPM Live is you can establish different communities, for example, where you could do all three of these things in the same company for different audiences who may have different portfolios and different objectives and strategies. So the key is it's a flexible solution that can be configured to the needs of the audience. So from a portfolio management perspective, we always provide portfolio visibility, whether it be on the incoming projects or the active projects that are being managed. But the idea is we want to provide centralized views of the projects, basically look at business alignment and risk assessment around our projects, Just gain portfolio visibility into all aspects of every project that's either actively being worked or being considered. And then really provide the fundamental data you'd like for prioritization and optimization of that portfolio. So the idea is to be able to gather, analyze, prioritize, and track all your project demands at whichever stage of the life cycle that they're in. Ultimately, you want to put some objective measures in place so that you can actually look and rank and categorize projects based upon a variety of different benefits or data points. The key is that the ones that are most important to your organization can either be entered or calculated and then used so you can visibly make some selections based upon those criteria that fit your priorities, right, and your weights and your measures. One aspect of this is the cost side of things. One of the things that are asked about a project before you get started is, what's it going to cost us and what are we going to get for it? What's the financial benefit that we're going to receive? EPM Live really provides very detailed cost planning capabilities so you can plan budgets, you can track actual costs, and you can even forecast benefits in things like revenue anticipated or cost savings anticipated. And the key is this is a key attribute of your selection process when you're deciding which projects make the most sense for us to work on. From a resource capacity planning perspective, long before you have tactical, bottoms-up schedules that people get assigned to, you may want to do high-level, top-down capacity planning from a resource management perspective so that whether on a generic resource type basis or on a named individual basis, get an idea what the resource ask is, what is it going to take to do this project, what's going to be the investment in resources to make sure this project gets completed successfully. So the resource implications of this, which ultimately have a financial implication, is another aspect of this top-down portfolio management process and some of the things that we'll do from a trade-off and what-if perspective. The idea is we cannot embark upon a portfolio successfully if the resourcing does not fall within our capacity to deliver those resources. So we always have to have a mind, do we have the budget and do we have the resources to do the projects that we intend to do? And a good portfolio would fall within those constraints so that we have a chance to deliver these things successfully and on a quality basis. And the key is once we start putting these parameters and measures in against projects, we can start doing what-if modeling. The idea being look at potential projects, maybe select or deselect projects in the portfolio, maybe take certain projects and delay them or sequence them differently out in time to have them fit within our dollar or resource constraints. The idea here is you want to be able to have this what-if modeling so you can evaluate alternatives, evaluate scenarios, both up front when you're doing your planning, say, on an annual basis for your portfolio, and also for those mid-course corrections that we talked about earlier on. In that regard, if you see down below, EPM Live has a number of analysis and what-if tools. We have a cost analyzer, a resource analyzer, a portfolio modeler, and an optimizer that help us really evaluate different scenarios and make intelligent decisions and help visualize what the implications are of different changes or adjustments that we might make. And then from a reporting perspective, we are building a rich set of data in here for our projects and our portfolios. And be able to surface those things in a variety of ways is powerful, whether they be chartings, whether they be Gantt charts, whether they be listing type of reports or more tabular types of things, more graphical indicators and things like that. There's such a flexible way to do this in EPM Live that the data set can be rendered not only with reporting and views in EPM Live itself, but also using common tools like Microsoft Office and Excel and SQL reporting services, etc., as you go on through. One of the keys here, and I'd like to iterate this, is that if you are a SharePoint shop and you are using SharePoint for general content management and collaboration, there's some real value to doing this portfolio management in SharePoint itself. Instead of what people traditionally do in buying standalone proprietary software that sets up yet another silo of information, we can be an incremental add into what you're doing in SharePoint. You can actually leverage what you already own. I mean, you already have a SharePoint platform. We install right into your existing SharePoint farm. You don't have to set up a separate infrastructure for it. That'll save you money and in the long run. Also, if your folks are using SharePoint, they know how to navigate through SharePoint. They know the general navigation principles and they know how to use it. We're just adding our capabilities into that environment, meaning you're going to reduce your adoption risk, meaning your users will have a good handle on how to get around in our system as opposed to a totally brand new foreign proprietary user interface. Also, you've already decided to invest in SharePoint, so why not maximize or increase the value from your current investment in SharePoint? If we can add all the value of project and portfolio management, both from a strategic and a tactical basis, you can maximize the benefit of your decision to invest in that platform. Also, if you already have the platform, then you have the skills internally that support the SharePoint platform and the SQL Server underpinnings on it. You don't have to learn new skill sets in order to support us, because we fall in right under your normal maintenance and administration within the SharePoint environment. And then we have the ability to provide capabilities in this solution that would maybe help you retire some of those standalone siloed implementations of different pieces of software and simplify what you're doing and have fewer pieces of software to get the job done. So just some things about the SharePoint mechanisms that might be of value to you. So with that, let's go into the demonstration. All right. For those of you that use SharePoint 2010, probably the overall look and feel of the product, it looks familiar to you in a standard SharePoint world. By the way, this is a SharePoint 2010 demonstration. We also have a SharePoint 2013 version that's ready to go. And so all of the capabilities and then some are available also for you in SharePoint 2013. Now, we're looking at a project center, and here in a simplified fashion is a list of projects that are either actively being worked or maybe a roster of projects that are being proposed or considered to being worked on. The idea is that you can put all the attributes around these. They can either come in through a request process where somebody makes project requests and they go through an approval process to even get to this state. We can talk about that a little later on, but at the end of the day, you're going to have a mix of candidate projects versus active projects that you're going to evaluate on a regular basis. How you actually score those projects is really up to you. On any given particular project, you can have attributes that make the most sense for your organization. Now, we have templates that have things out of the box for you, where you can start aligning these projects with potential portfolios out of a list of portfolios that you might have. You can enumerate the benefits and the descriptions of a project from a more narrative perspective. You can categorize and classify the projects based upon the business initiatives and the type of projects they are, et cetera, et cetera. You can name the players and the actors within the project process. And then other things like strategic scoring. For example, you can have categories that have their own weights that, based upon what you select, have a numeric score behind the scene that allow you to determine on a comparative basis from one project to the next how these things meet. Now, in this example, I have 4 categories that contribute to the weighted score: strategic alignment, cost reduction, improve employee satisfaction, and risk. So on strategic alignment, what I select here as far as how well it's aligned with overall business strategy will drive a business score times a weight for this category. Cost reduction. How well is this going to provide cost reduction within our organization? You know, there could be another category in here, look for revenue. Improve employee satisfaction is a category we have here. And then risk. How risky is this endeavor? Do we really know this, or is we on uncharted ground that there may be high risk involved? The idea is that the combination of these, and these would be as many different fields and categories that make the most sense to score your projects, they would result in a weighted score for your project as you go on through, as well as other different parameters that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So as we come on through this project, as you come here, you would go and look and potentially look at the item, and I think this view will actually give us a calculated score based on that weight. So our prioritization score came up to a 60 based upon the selections that we made here. And that's based on the weightings and the numerics that are in here. There's also going to be some values that will show you how we get to on things like ROI and other financial measures based upon other attributes we put in against this project, or I should say potential project. One of the aspects on this is long before this project entity has detailed planning or schedules behind it, you might want to evaluate the resource implications of this. And to do that on a top-down basis, we do have resource planning. So the strategic merger evaluation is what are the resource requirements that we're going to need here. Now, early on in this process, it might be high-level planning. We might not know specifically who we're going to use or what, but we might know what we need. So we can plan in terms of hours or FTEs or percentages of allocation. We could simply go in on a generic role basis and say, you know, I need a project manager on this, I need a developer on this project, and any other resources that you might need on this project. Then also, as you go on through from an FTE basis, I can allocate values. So on the duration of this project, I could say for the entire duration of the project, I need a project manager for a half an FTE. In a drag and drop and very simple basis, I've now accommodated that and said this is the resource ask. I need a project manager about half time over the months that are covering this project. The developer I might need something more along the lines of a full FTE. So I might type in a full FTE and maybe the development work doesn't start until the second month of the project. And the idea is that those things go on through and you can plan this for all the resource types in your organization. Very high level, very top down, has nothing to do with detailed schedules at this point. It's really about establishing value and the business case for what the ask is for all the dimensions of the project. Now ultimately, you're going to be able to find matches later on and be able to determine who's going to fulfill the work and do the replacements. But at this point in the strategic top-down business-driven approach, this is probably sufficient at this point in time. Also, there's the aspect of cost management. If you come in here and you want to edit costs, a very detailed line item budget and benefit statement can be made. So in this case, for example, whatever categories that you would track your financials to would be established in the system. And then on a time phase basis, you can look at line item detailed budgets that actually all total up to a total budget for this project. Now, when you get to execution, yes, you may want to track actual costs against those same categories and enter them in the system or have them come in from your financial system. But at this point, maybe the benefits estimates that's going to justify this are important at this point. Like what revenue might we be expecting and when? Maybe what expense reductions or savings we're going to look at or efficiencies we're looking at. So as part of the overall statement of the business case and the value of this project, we should be looking at not only what it's going to cost us from a budget perspective, but what the returns we're going to get on that and do some estimates on that. And to be quite frank, folks that are mature in this process often might have realized benefits or actual benefits as a tab in here as well. So we can not only just track what they used to justify the project, but then track what they really realized as far as the real returns and savings and benefits from the project. The key here is, as you go on through, is that's where ROI is being calculated based on the returns and the that you're looking for, as well as the cost, and be able to evaluate those projects on those particular bases. Now, once you start putting data like this in there, you can evaluate your portfolio from a variety of different views. You know, EPM Live provides you with a lot of different out-of-the-box views as you go on through. So here I'm looking at just a regular project summary that really just talks about the budget and the status. Notice that everything's green on the proposed project, so we haven't really started yet. But the idea here is we can look at this from other traditional top-down portfolio management perspectives. For example, I might want to look at the ever-popular bubble chart when you're looking at portfolio management disciplines. A very flexible tool where you can set your own parameters. Here I might be looking at this by 4 parameters and see 4 dimensions in here. In this case, I'm looking at the x-axis being return on investment and the y-axis being risk rating. The size of the bubble is the budget for the project, and the color is what life cycle stage we're in. The idea here is we want things with low risk and high return. Low risk and high return, we don't have a lot in here in this portfolio for that. But as we hover over, we can see which projects maybe are high risk and low return. And these are some things that might factor into our decision-making process. What's nice about this is you can look at this from a variety of different perspectives that you choose to evaluate. For example, what if I wanted to look at strategic alignment versus prioritization? Let's see, prioritization score. I could look at that and apply that. Then I can start looking at strategic alignment rankings and see all the projects that have strategic alignment ratings and then basically the prioritization scores around those. So high priority, high strategic alignment, it looks like some of our biggest projects are actually falling into that category, which is a good sign. High priority for the organization and good strategic alignment. So the idea is there's some flexible evaluation you can do here on the way you look at this from a bubble chart perspective. Also, when I did the scoring, when I picked those categories of weighted scoring and other values that might help us do an assessment of project selection, I could potentially go into a project assessment view. Let me go into more of a grid mode to make it a little easier for you to view. And now you see the different projects in their different stages of the life cycle. Each of the categories, like in cost reduction, we can see which categories were selected for each of those, the resultant prioritization score for these particular projects, and then the planned benefits that came out of the cost planner, where we actually had the benefit statements that went in there. Could have a column here for budget, but based on this, I'm looking at ROI based on the cost and the planned benefits. Then I can do things like look at my prioritization score as well as establish my own ranking. So as I look at this and other parameters, I can maybe establish my own rankings of how I'm prioritizing the projects that factor in not only the calculated prioritization score, but other dimensions of the project as well. And then we can start making decisions on whether or not to include this project in the active portfolio or not. Once again, these views are variable and modifiable by the user. From an executive summary perspective, we might look at this stuff a different way. It's really about flexible views and getting the information and the data points you need to make decisions. Here, for example, we've got some more status or status-oriented type of information, some KPIs, but now we've got proposed and active projects that are also then further subdivided by the strategy that the projects are aligned with. So whichever strategy or initiative that the projects are aligned with are now categorized here, so we can see which projects are assigned with which initiatives, and also see their relative health as they contribute to that. And then other things like costs. You can also view, cost summaries, say, by portfolio. So as we go on through, we can look at the different portfolios, and then we can start looking at the real cost implications of how we're doing on these things as well. Budget, actual cost, remaining cost, etc. So when we're evaluating projects that are already in flight or active, and we're trying to determine whether we should continue with those projects rather than supplant them with, say, an emerging, promising project, how they're performing could be a valuable piece of information or a data point in your selection process. Another key piece is I've been looking at this from a project center perspective with the detailed projects, but we can also establish very distinct portfolios. So you can look at this from a multi-portfolio perspective. For example, in this case, you might have a portfolio that says, I want all my SOX compliance projects, or all my product innovation projects, or all my improved customer retention projects in here. And each of these can have their own budgets and resource plans, etc. But then you can evaluate any one of these at any given point in time and say, show me the projects that are aligned with that product innovation portfolio. I can come in here and I can take a look at this in total and look at all the projects associated with this and look at the totals of everything that's coming into this particular portfolio, and manage these from different perspectives based upon the portfolios that they're in. Then you can look at portfolio level reports that really are about how things aggregate into these different portfolios. For example, if I want to look at portfolio costs and benefits, I can start looking at this at a portfolio level perspective and start saying, here's my different portfolios, and here's the dollar values associated with those in the metrics that are about the aggregate number of projects that are each of these things that are supporting each of these portfolios. Also portfolio dashboards that raise it a level higher. I could look at a portfolio dashboard that then rolls the data in to see how my different portfolios are performing or how they're profiling. For example, on these different portfolios, I can start looking at the planned benefit versus the budget. It looks like the product innovation portfolio is really going to bring us the most benefit out of all those different portfolios. And it looks like the budget that we have is far exceeded by the benefits that we're going to get. Same thing with the project priority by benefit. You can look at these different portfolios and start looking at which projects are part of those portfolios as indicated by color. And then things like cost and performance, how we're doing, our actual cost versus the budget. Is our budget being adhered to, or are we exceeding budgets on these different portfolios? And you can actually look at different member projects to those different portfolios and look at individual metrics. The idea, these are all data points that help us evaluate how we're doing and whether or not we're working on the right things and to what extent we're investing in these different areas, and does it make the most sense based upon our goals and objectives. Also, you can have different roles in here. So for example, I talked about this just looking from a project perspective. We could have a whole intake process where requests are coming in on a daily basis from the business or from other sources. Somebody who is in more of a portfolio management role may have a totally different landing area that really gives them things like a list of projects waiting approval. They may be one of multiple people who have to approve this to even say, let's even consider this and put further investigation in. Or they can start looking at their own personal bubble charts on their home page and their own charting and things like that. The idea is on the front of this, you can put an intake process that actually has some governance and approval, just even to get a candidate project to the point where somebody's approving it and saying, this is worthy of us investing time in for the planning perspective and the business case to help justify this project to potentially become an active project. All right, let me go back to our projects community, and let's start talking about the areas of what-if analysis. I think this is one of the strong areas we have here in EPM Live. Obviously, we're entering a lot of data. We're characterizing and categorizing our projects. We're putting values in on things like resources and budgets and cost and returns and those types of things. But let's say, for example, I go into the projects area and I want to do some what-if analysis. Now, we put a resource plan in against the strategic merger evaluations, but what about the aggregate? What does it look like after we take into account all the resource capacity plans we built on a top-down basis for all these projects? What's it going to take for us to do these? And I can go into what we call, after selecting the proposed and active projects, go into some resource analysis. Now, what's nice about this, it's going to render some data for me, and it's going to render it to me in a what-if mode, meaning I can do a lot of manipulation and seeing the impacts of things without impacting the core data or committing that scenario at the outset. It gives me the ability to evaluate a lot of different options. So the idea is if it pulls together all of the projects and all of the resource plans we put together, we can then start seeing in a variety of ways. On a named individual basis, I can see that if we did all the projects that I selected, both the proposed and the active, it looks like I have certain resource constraints on an individual level. So for example, I can look at these things and see, God, my lead DBA has some significant overallocations in the current plan. Should we decide to do all these? Well, what can I do here? Maybe I say, you know, the Active Directory project is something that's low priority right now or not urgent. What if I deselected that? Would it help me? Well, from an Ed perspective, it looks like, yes, it gets him into a realm where he has a workload that he can actually perform. So that's an option, and I can save that as a scenario. Say, take Ed off of Active Directory. I can evaluate this scenario with other folks in the mix. Or I could say, you know, we really have to do all these projects. I'm going to put the Active Directory back into the mix. So after I do that, I'll say, you know, what if we took that Active Directory project and just delayed it out 6 or 7 months? How would that help? And I can go on through here and take a look and see how it re-racks and tells me if it's something that might be considerable. Well, it looks like to me here that it's just deferring the pain on Ed, okay, as we go on through. So maybe that's not a viable option, so I think I'll just undo that change. Or I could have saved that as a scenario just to illustrate the point. The other question I might ask is, God, it looks like Ed has some difficulty in this DBA realm he's in. You know, what if I want to look at the totals a little differently? You know, what if I wanted to come in here and say, let me total this information up by the roles that these resources feed into and not by the individuals? If I looked at it from that perspective, I can see that I have capacity in my DBA ranks, okay? And I can see that there is options that I have in here where I could say perhaps replace Ed on the Active Directory project with someone else and solve the problem as well. Resource management in a detailed basis, we'll leave that for another day, but the idea is that we can evaluate these what-if scenarios to determine the best course of action. In this case, it's from a resource perspective and a resource constraint perspective. On the other hand, we can do the same thing with costs. All those budgets we put in place, we can actually open up a cost analyzer. This cost analyzer will actually render and rack up all of the costs in the different categories we budgeted to, so we could take a look and see where we stand. What's it going to take to do all these? And whether or not these things fit within our budgets. And if they do fit within our budgets, great. If not, we can do the same type of process from a financial perspective. We can deselect projects and look at the financial implications. We can move projects out in time, etc. So the same concept we were looking at with the resource planning tool, but really doing it from a dollar or a financial basis instead of just resource loading and capacity. And then we have another tool called our Portfolio Modeler. Based upon the selections I see here, I can come in here on the modeler and get more of a Gantt chart type of perspective on this. So for example here, I'm looking at all the candidate projects, and I can look at this from a variety of different perspectives. I could look at it, by the way, the fields of data we show in here are totally up to you. It could show things like prioritization scores and return on investment, things that would help you basically make those determinations on which projects to select. And we can also apply targets. So if I have a budget target that I want to evaluate this portfolio against, I could put it on here and turn that bottom section into more of a heat map perspective where I can see where we're over and under allocated. And much like this from a perspective, I can take in and say, geez, what if we didn't do these couple projects? Would that get us within our within the realm we need to be in? And it's going to rack that up and tell me if well, I got closer, but it didn't solve the final job. But I could save this as a version or as a scenario so I can evaluate this without impacting the data. And maybe it's a combination of deselecting those projects and taking a maybe significant project and moving it out 6-9 months. And by doing that, we can actually look at the project and say, what if the combination of deselection of certain projects and sequencing these projects differently get us closer to where we need to be? And we can actually look and see where our deltas are. Even when we're over and under, I can show the remaining and see how far we're off in each of these areas. It sounds like these are the areas in this area. It looks like in the equipment area, I'm $40,000 over in this area. But the other ones seem to be more manageable and more minimal from a budget variance perspective. So the idea is you can start using tools like this to start evaluating different portfolio scenarios, both at the outset and for your mid-course corrections that we talked about in the slide presentation. And then a relatively new tool we put in here is our optimizer. That optimizer is really a way to do portfolio selection based upon a variety of parameters altogether. And if I come into the optimizer, it's going to take the project selections that I made and feed those into an optimizer. So here, if I did all of the projects that were selected, it would cost me almost $3.8 million. And there's a planned benefit or estimated benefit of over $9.2 million on this selection of projects. Well, I can start new strategies and new optimization scenarios here from scratch, but I'm going to load, just for the interest of time, one that we did prior and show that if I actually wanted to limit myself to $3,250,000 based upon certain selections that we're making, these would be the projects that would not make the cut. The idea being is that based upon selecting projects that and cutting out projects below a certain prioritization score, cutting out projects that are below a certain level of planned benefits, and cutting out projects that actually have a certain budget threshold, that combination of parameters would then help me on a more automated assist basis see my options. And what's nice about these sliders is these are really filters. So for example, let's just say I took this filter and I basically took all the projects back in. And I say, let's not cut anything out. I now have the full budget in here, all the projects selected. And by doing multiple selections, I could say, all right, well, let's do part of this by prioritization. And let's say, let's just, take no projects under a certain priority. So basically, if we go up to 40 here, that basically kicks out a project that's in here. If we say the planned benefit side of things, if I say don't give us any projects that give us less than $150,000 worth of benefit, then all of a sudden that kicks out a couple different projects based upon that as we go on through. And then I could say, all right, I don't want to tackle it with the minor projects that are going to give us lower return, then I'll kick out a few extra projects as we go on through. The idea is you can set up different values to be these sliders and these different parameters to come up with a selection that gets you close to your budget target. And with that, you can actually set projects that actually get forced in or forced out. For example, a project could have to be in and be selected no matter what. If you had a regulatory or a compliance project, it's not about the return, it's more about the fact we have to do it, so let's just make that a given as we go on through. Or we've decided for other reasons that the project is definitely out, we don't want it in under any circumstances, we can force that project out as well. So once again, these are automated assist ways for you to actually kind of evaluate different alternatives to optimize that portfolio based upon a number of different parameters. And you can really pursue a number of different strategies in here and have different scenarios that you can store and save that you can review with other people. So once again, not just one but 4 different what-ifing tools each of which have different settings and parameters to look at these portfolios in a variety of different ways and provide the selection decision support that you're looking for. We also have a wide variety of reporting in our solution. So whether it be portfolio level reporting or project level reporting on an individual basis, we have reporting here that really allows us to look at portfolios and projects. We provide well over 100 reports out of the box, different dashboard views and bubble charts and metrics on different project requests and where they're sitting. And we also have out-of-the-box SQL reports that basically allow you to do things in a nice fashion. For example, even our drill-in reports. I might look at a drill-in project dashboard, and we can choose, for example, which projects and which portfolios to include in this mix, and basically run these types of reports. The idea is that we're building a rich data set, and the parameters here are all pretty broad. So here, for example, I can look at a report view of this portfolio, something that I saw a view of live within the solution. But for example, there's folks that may want this data pushed to them rather than have them go pull it dynamically. And we can actually pull these in the report and view them in the viewer or put them out to common formats like PDF, Excel, or Word so that we can actually put these out to distribution lists to executives and other folks that might want that stuff pushed to them. But as we start looking at where we're at on budget status, for example, I might drill into that. And I might be able to drill into that dashboard type of report to get further data and further breakouts on what that means from a budget perspective. I might want to look at this from a effort perspective and how we're spending our resource time on these projects. I can start looking at a drill down on that, where I can see, hey, I'm actually spending my resources slower than I'm actually gaining progress on my project, which means I'm earning progress and completion on these projects faster, so I'm spending my resources well and I'm getting good efficiency. So those types of details you can get right out of the system based upon evaluating portfolio performance and project performance. With that, I'd like to say hopefully we demonstrated to you today that EPM Live isn't really just a tactical work management tool, that there's a lot of top-down portfolio management capabilities in here that allow you to take a business-driven approach to really selecting your portfolios. And I personally am of the opinion that a combination of the top-down and the bottom-up approach is your best bet as an organization. Make sure you're working on the right things and you're selecting things that add value to the organization. And then by selecting the right things and selecting an appropriate workload for the company, you will then by default execute better. And then you can put better execution methodologies in so you can actually perform better in delivering those projects. But then when you're delivering those projects, you're delivering the right projects. Doesn't matter if you perform well on a project, if it's the wrong project, it still doesn't add value to the organization. So the idea is the combination of doing the right work and doing the right work right is really the best value to the organization. We're happy to talk with you about how this might apply to your organization. Feel free to follow up with us at sales@epmlive.com or put an inquiry into the Q&A panel that we can respond to. Once again, you'll be getting a recorded version of this presentation as well as the slides that we went over. Good luck with your endeavors in your organization to be more business-driven in the way you're doing your portfolio management, and let us know if we can help you in any way. Thank you again for your time this morning, and we'll hope to talk to you soon.